Witch Trials Weekly, Video 17, May the 6th to May the 12th, 1692. Reverend Burroughs, the Jacobs family, and more examinations.
Philip English continued to elude officers as they searched for him, at one point hiding behind a stack of dirty laundry at his colleague George Hollard's home. Warrants were issued for Bethia Carter and her daughter Bethia Jr., Ann Sears, and Sarah Dustin. The specter of Reverend George Burroughs appeared to Mercy Lewis with a book for her to touch, claiming it wouldn't harm her. The book was not one she recognized from when she used to work for him. He then bragged he could raise the devil and had recruited Abigail Hobbs and killed Elizabeth Shepherd with witchcraft. When Mercy asked him how he would have done this while locked away, he said he allowed the devil to work in his shape. His examination was first on May 9th. William Stoughton and Samuel Sewell joined Judges John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin. There was a private examination first before the public one. The ghosts of his first two wives had told Ann Putnam Jr. and Susan Sheldon different conflicting details about their deaths, but the magistrate overlooked that. Burroughs said, "Some of you may observe that when they begin to name my name, they cannot name it." To him, this meant that the girls were wrong in accusing him. To others, it was because an invisible evil force interfered. There were many depositions against him from the Hobbs women, Eliezer Kaiser, and several respected men of the community. And so, Reverend George Burroughs was held for trial. Sarah Churchill had perhaps been in court as an afflicted witness, but she was then examined and held for trial. She had worked for George Jacobs Sr. until she started having fits, at which point he called her witch bitch. When she tried to change her story, she was questioned like the formerly afflicted Mary Warren. Because Sarah Churchill knew the magistrates wouldn't believe her, she confessed. If her pain was gone, it would be assumed she had cooperated with the devil. She said her name was in the book twice, along with George Jacobs Sr., George Jacobs Jr., and Margaret Jacobs. After this, arrest warrants were sworn out for George Jacobs Sr., his granddaughter Margaret, and John Willard, who had fled. During George Jacobs Sr.'s examination on May 10th, he scoffed at the girls and told Sarah Churchill that he would accept the charge of witchcraft if you can prove that I am guilty. She gave several examples of spectral pain, and although George Jacobs Sr. said, as many others before him, that the devil could go around in any shape, the magistrates ignored him. "You tax me for a wizard? You may as well tax me for a buzzard. I have done no harm." When asked why he prayed alone and not with his family, he said it was because he couldn't read. "Well, burn me or hang me, I will stand in the truth of Christ. I know nothing of it." He was questioned further on the 11th, but when the girls all fell writhing and couldn't approach him, he was held for trial. After his examination, Sarah Churchill supposedly told Sarah Ingersoll and Ann Andrews, another of George Jacobs Sr.'s daughters, that she lied in her confession about signing the devil's book, but they threatened her, she said, threatened to imprison her with Burroughs and the rest. She sobbed that now that she had confessed, she couldn't take it back. Margaret Jacobs was so terrified by what the girls did during their examination that all she could remember were threats of imprisonment and hanging if she didn't confess, and promises of freedom if she did. Little did she understand, the magistrates meant only spiritual freedom. Witchcraft was seen as a capital crime. Confessors were spared if they could testify against others. Not all who confessed realized this reprieve was only temporary. She implicated her grandfather, George Jacobs Sr., Reverend George Burroughs, John Willard, and Alice Parker. Later in prison, Margaret was afraid the devil would take her away for the lies she told, but she didn't deny her confession yet. In prison, Mary Warren continued to be questioned about the book she signed. "I didn't know then, but I know it now to be sure. It was the devil's book in the first place, to be sure. I did set my hand to the devil's book. I've considered it since you were here last, and it was the devil's book my master proctor brought to me, and he told me if I set my hand to that book, I should believe." She also admitted to being brought puppets to perform image magic. When Reverend John Higginson and Reverend John Hale visited Mary Warren, the specters of Alice Parker and Ann Pudiator bothered her. Warrants were issued for these two women. Ann Pudiator was an easy target because she was a nurse. Goody Neal got ill after using her mortar, and her first husband's wife died while under her care. Alice Parker may have suffered from catalepsy, a trance-like state marked by loss of voluntary motion and limbs remaining rigidly in place, but she denied being a witch. 11 people were transferred to Boston jail: George Jacobs Sr., Giles Corey, William Hobbs, Edward and Sarah Bishop, Bridget Bishop, Sarah Wilds, Mary Black, Mary English, Alice Parker, and Ann Pudiator. On Wills Hill, Bray Wilkins and Daniel Wilkins, two of John Willard's relations by marriage, were ill. Daniel had said the week before, "Willard ought to be hanged." Maybe his vengeful spirit was tormenting them now. Later on, Mercy Lewis and Ann Putnam Jr. went to visit Bray Wilkins. The girls said they saw specters of John Willard and Sarah Buckley sitting on his stomach and thus causing his illness. People struck at the specters, and Bray was immediately but temporarily relieved of pain.
This video was produced with special permission from the author, Marilyn K. Roach, and publisher, Cooper Square Press. The Salem Witch Trials, a day-by-day chronicle of a community under siege, covers the years 1692 to 1697 in detail. It also touches briefly on important and relevant events before and after this time. We are proud to carry all of Miss Roach's books and publications in our museum store. To get a copy for your personal research and enjoyment, please visit www.salemwitchmuseum.com.